one of our boys came up and he was talking to me and he said, "Are you scared?" And I said, "Yeah, I am scared." I said, "But you have to think, David had to have been scared going against Goliath. And Daniel had to have been scared going into the lion's den. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had to be scared not bowing down. But when God calls you to do something, you have to try. No matter how scared you are, no matter what you're feeling, if he's calling you to do it, you better try." Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I have a lot to tell you. I am no longer in Haiti. I am stuck in Florida. So it's a really long story, and I'm just gonna hop on here and tell you guys what the current situation is. So October 14th, I got a phone call that my aunt is not doing well. She wasn't my blood aunt, but we were very, very close, and I looked at her as my aunt. And so I get this phone call that she's not doing well and she's not responsive, and they didn't know how much longer she was going to live. Well, this was just so hard for me to deal with, especially being out of the country, being so far away from my family, watching my mom be absolutely devastated, and there was nothing I could do. So I knew it wasn't looking good, and I just waited. So the next morning, I get a phone call that she had passed away that night. And I mourned. I mean, I took the day off, and I went up the mountain behind our house, and I just spent hours with the Lord up on this mountain. And so after that, I didn't really know what the rest of the day or the week was gonna look like. All I knew is that my family was going through a serious battle and watching them struggle, and I prayed, and I felt like God was telling me to go back to Ohio. So I booked a flight that night for the next day. But right now, Haiti is doing really bad. I mean, when I say really bad, the country is doing really bad. So it wasn't looking likely that I would be able to get out. So I talked to the staff, and I got permission. They said, "You're more than welcome to try to get out. We know that it's not going to be easy, but if you can try, do it." And so I prepared. And yeah, Haiti's really bad right now. There's a bunch of rioting due to government decisions, and they're not happy with who's in office, and they want him out, and it is a mess. And but God's working in that, and I know that there's a reason for it, and I know there's a reason for why I left. And so I don't know how much I want to get into. Okay, so I had to move seats because I think it's like an AC unit started going off, and I didn't think you guys could hear me very well. So this is what the video is going to be like. So October 14th, I book a flight for October 15th. And there's a lot of riots going on. Not a lot of people are out. And I knew going out, I was putting my life at risk, and Sky's life at risk, who was driving me. And he lives in Destiny Village and is one of my really close friends. Yeah. Gosh, I hate talking about this. October 14th, I booked my flight, and I started saying my goodbyes and trying to get everything in order. People thought I was crazy. Like the kids that I live with and our workers, that I was absolutely nuts. And some of them were saying goodbye to me like it was the last time they would ever see me. And that was really the risk I was taking, trying to get back. So I contacted my parents and I said, hey, I'm going to try to get back. And they didn't want me to if it was putting my life at risk, but I really feel like I needed to be home for my family. I feel like that's what God was calling me to go. And so I got everything in order. I'm teaching a class right now, so I had to hand that off and get all the details together of what she needed to teach. And yeah, so that night I was sitting in the apartment I'm staying at, and one of our boys came up and he was talking to me and he said, "Are you scared?" And I said, "Yeah, I am scared." I said, "But you have to think, David had to have been scared going against Goliath. And Daniel had to have been scared going into the lion's den. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had to be scared not bowing down. But when God calls you to do something, you have to try. No matter how scared you are, no matter what you're feeling, if he's calling you to do it, you better try." And so he just kind of looked at me like I was crazy. It was tough preparing for that. And we were planning on taking a car, but the next morning Sky comes up to me and he said, "We're not going to be able to get a car through. So we have two options. We can either cancel the trip or take a motorcycle through." And I said, "Okay, let's take the motorcycle. We have to try." And this made it 10 times more dangerous, even more, so much, so much more dangerous, because now you have no protection and you're really vulnerable. So he said, "All right." We tried to get things together. We couldn't find the motorcycle papers. He hands me like padding, a helmet, gloves, said, "Put these on." I didn't call my parents. I didn't tell them, but I knew I just had to try. But my prayers that day were so raw and so real. I didn't know I was capable of praying some of the things that I did. We get ready to go. Katie had my class pray for me, and we left. So I get on the motorcycle and I'm so nervous. Like, I have never had much experience riding on a motorcycle, and on top of the nerves, I was a mess. Like, I didn't know how close to be. I feel like I was super unstable, and I was just an absolute mess. So we're driving and our road seems fine. Nothing seems abnormal. But then we get onto the main road and it's so dead. There's nobody on it. It's so quiet. And there's just rocks all over the place, all in the road. Our motorcycles swerving in and out of them. And there's just not a lot of people. So we come to our first roadblock. And I don't know if Sky knew these guys, but they were just kind of talking. Like, nothing felt too scary. We paid them off to get through. Nothing felt, I wasn't scared. But I knew what was to come, and so I started praying some crazy prayers. Like, I was just in my head with God like never before, and I was so scared. And I kept praying. I said, "Lord, search my heart, search my intentions. If this isn't of you, if any of this is me just trying to get back to America, I want you to just stop the motorcycle, Don't have us killed." Because in the Bible, I feel like so many times people were running their own way or trying to force their own will, and really bad things happen. So I was really scared of what could possibly happen, and I just asked the Lord to search my heart. I was praying that if anyone were to die, let it be me, not Sky. I don't know how much I want to share. That is really, really, really hard. And so we're driving, and we're going down back routes, and we're paying a lot of people off. And I continue to pray and just feel pretty scared. And as we're driving, and I'm just getting deeper and deeper into my prayers, like, Lord, I asked him, I said, if I am to be taken, like if I'm to be taken off this motorcycle and their intentions are to rape me, I want to die. And it's the first time I've ever prayed anything like that. Like, for God, the alternative is to die. And it was definitely a turning point in my life, just realizing how close death truly is. And I was scared, but I just wanted God to have his will, and I wanted to make sure my intentions were good and clean. And so at one point in the ride, I'm praying these crazy prayers, just asking for God's protection and to be with us. And he told me, he said, I will protect you, I will get you there, I will protect Sky, and I will get him home. And in that moment, I felt like God's hand was hovering over the motorcycle, like just completely. I had peace, I had comfort that God was protecting us and that we were going to get there, and it was what it was. So from that moment on, I really had peace. The motorcycle ride was, I think, about 2 hours long, and it was long. Like, we were going down rock roads and just unreal, these hills, and going down a motorcycle on them. It wasn't enjoyable, but I did feel God's peace. Every roadblock we went through, I just tried to keep my head down and not cause a lot of attention to the fact that I was white or I was a girl. And I kept my head into Sky's back and just went through the roadblocks. And it did get a lot of attention. I think the last thing they expected to see was a white person riding on a motorcycle through the riots, or through this time in Haiti. But I didn't feel a lot of fear after that moment of God's peace. And but then we get to Port-au-Prince, their capital. And this is where things get crazy. We're driving in, and it was very quiet. There wasn't a lot of people going into port. Once we got in there were more cars, more traffic. I think just locals who live there, but not a lot of people were choosing to go into port. We get in, and we are going down side streets trying to find a back way into the airport because we didn't have our papers for our motorcycle. I look up ahead and my heart just sank. I see these men wrapped in, their heads are wrapped in rags, and it was the most eerie looking scene I've ever seen. You could just see their eye holes, like not even their eyeballs, but just, they cut these little slits out and you could only see their eyeballs. And some were hanging in cars trying to get them to stop. And the scene just looked different than the other roadblocks. So I put my head where Sky's back was covering me, and I just tried to not draw a lot of attention, even though I was in pads, so that kind of drew attention in itself. And these guys are talking to Sky, and he's paying them off, and I hear like them whispering like blah, like, and my heart sank because I knew they could see me, and that I was very vulnerable. As we're driving off, one tried to grab me, and I have never been grabbed in a way where I didn't have permission, or where I wasn't giving consent. And I've been very blessed in that aspect, but this was the first time, and it was very, very real, that at any time I could be grabbed off this motorcycle. And even though before I had the peace of God, now I started to doubt, because I knew that I could just be grabbed, and I was very scared. And so we drove on, but I was sick. I knew that no matter if I try to fight it, like, there's nothing I could say to get out of a bad situation in this moment, because I feel like whatever happens gonna happen, and I just kind of had to accept the fate of that. And so I was sitting back there like shook. I was completely shook, and but I knew we were close to the airport, and so our journey was almost done. So we stop at a stoplight, and honestly, after that situation, this stoplight felt like the longest thing of my life. And the longer we stood there, I just felt like I started getting people's eyes, and I don't want any attention. I just wanted to be completely invisible and unseen. And finally the light turned green and everything was good. And then shortly after, we made it to the airport. And when I got there, I was completely numb and paralyzed inside. Like, I remember walking up to the airport and I started to feel things, and I was like, not now, don't feel. And I knew if I started to feel the loss of my aunt, if I started to feel the fact that I just drove through turmoil, that I would lose my mind. So I was like, don't feel. And I walk into the airport, I get through security, and I'm just paralyzed. And so I get my Pringles and my Fanta, my orange Fanta. I went to a little shop and bought them. I'm completely just numb, just completely shook of what I just drove through, and the fact of putting my life on the line. I've never done that like that. And so I just sit there and I'm just like shoving my mouth full, like I know I looked like a crazy lady. And I was looking for a seat, and I couldn't even function to find one, just because my mind, the past 48 hours had been so traumatic and so life-altering that I couldn't even function. So I sit down and I'm just shoving my Pringles in my mouth. And at that moment, I didn't know I was even in the right place or what. So I look over and I see a man who looks like an American, but you never know in the airports because they could easily be French. I look over and I was like, "Are you American?" And with this deep Alabama accent, he says yes. And his name is Chase. And I got to learn about him and his family, and he's super significant. And I met five men on my journey home: Chase, John, Peter, David, and Dick. And each man was so significant in my journey, and God used each man so much. So I'm going to talk about all of them, but I'm actually going to break this up into several parts because this is taking a lot longer than I expected. And so this is part 1 of my journey back to America. So stay tuned. Bye, guys.